Well, after retaking the House of Representatives, congressional Democrats are feeling newly emboldened about rolling back the Second Amendment. Earlier this year, California Democrat Eric Swalwell called for confiscating all so-called assault weapons, scary-looking rifles, and bringing criminal charges against anyone who resisted. We're not misquoting that. He wrote it in an op-ed in USA Today. Then just days ago on Twitter, one critic said this would provoke armed resistance against the government, because obviously it would. Swalwell responded this way, quote, "It would be a short war, my friend. The government has nukes. In other words, obey or we'll kill you." Jumaane Williams is a New York City councilman who joins us tonight. Mr. Williams, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So there's something admirable about the straightforwardness from our old friend, Congressman Swalwell. If you don't obey, we'll just kill you. What do you think of that?
Come on, Tucker, we all have to get to a place where we can have a conversation about what's happening in this country, and have a respectable one. So,
do you think threatening people with violence is a good way to get to that
no,
place?
I don't think that's the good way to have a conversation, nor do I think having a conversation about guns not being part of the problem is a good way to have a conversation. So we should start with guns are a part of the problem and figure out how to deal with it.
Okay, but when a sitting U.S. and by the way, we know Swalwell very well.
Sure.
I personally like him. We asked him to come on to respond directly. I should say that. But when a sitting U.S. congressman says, you know, if you don't like it, if you're going to resist in any way, we'll just drop your nuclear weapons on you. We don't even threaten our martial enemies with that. I mean, that's a bit much, no?
Well, first I was remiss, prayers and peace of comfort for the victims of the Chicago mass shooting. But like the mother of a victim that happened in California who said she was tired of prayers, she wanted action. We have to have actionable items. And so I don't consider nukes on people who have guns an actionable item. But there are actionable items. And
so you are the moderate for the first time.
I don't know about the moderate.
Well, you're against killing American citizens. So
that's a moderate.
That puts you in the moderate category. So let me just ask you this. So here's my confusion. I have no problem trying to disarm people who are threatening. The problem I have with gun confiscation is that it punishes people like me who pose no threat at all, and many millions of other Americans who have no criminal record, no intent to harm anybody, want guns for self-defense. And it says to them, you're a criminal now because you have a gun that we think looks
you
scary.
Have jumped to confiscation.
Well, but no, Eric Swalwell, who's a member of the Intel Committee, is a powerful
But we should have
member.
a conversation about, one, is there an issue with guns in this country, and what do we do with that? And the actionable items are quite clear. One, we can address loopholes in assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Two, we can deal with dealers who have been unscrupulous.
Okay.
And three, we can begin to treat guns like we do cars. That's just on the demand side.
But okay.
I mean, on the supply
I'll address
side.
That. I mean,
has to be on the demand side.
You have members of Congress, at least one prominent member of Congress, saying we're going to take your guns away by force. Okay. So apparently you're not calling for that, though. We both know you're secretly for that. But
we don't both know that, but okay.
Okay, but I believe you're for that. I believe
you
many
can believe what you like. I'm here to have a discussion.
Are you for that?
On the issue? No. Listen, we should have a discussion.
Okay, then let's talk about magazines.
Sure.
You say high capacity. I think it means any more than 10. If I have a magazine that has 15-round capacity, why is it a threat to anyone?
We have to start with, and I'm repeating this again, with everyone agreeing that guns and the access to guns are an issue in this country.
Well, how about this? I don't agree with that.
You do not.
I think a gun is a tool, and in the hands, like any tool, in the hands of someone with malintent, it's very dangerous.
So I
don't have
this.
malintent. So would I be forced to give up any magazines that I had that exceeded the capacity?
I will say this. If a hammer killed 33,000 Americans every single year, we would be screaming and yelling, let's regulate hammers. Guns are only made for killing. What I'm saying is let's at least treat guns how we treat vehicles.
But you're speaking theoretically, and I want to speak tangibly.
I'm speaking specifically.
So there are millions upon millions of so-called high-capacity magazines out there. They're in circulation, tens of millions of them. What do we do with those?
So I mentioned three things. I mentioned dealing with the high-capacity magazines and the assault weapons. I mentioned the loopholes of gun dealers.
Stick with the magazines.
But I mentioned also treating guns like we treat vehicles. That's just on the supply side.
Okay, but I'm sorry to press you for specifics, but since this is what you do, let me press you. There are tens of millions of magazines that fit more than 10 rounds in circulation. People, normal people with no criminal records own them. What do we do with them?
I tell you what, in New York City, we're the safest city of guns we've been since 1951. I've been a leading voice in dealing with gun violence in New York City.
Oh, so you won't answer the question. That's why nobody trusts the gun people, because we know that you're gun grabbers because you're not straightforward.
Again, part of the gun violence problem. I asked you this last time. You wouldn't answer
What would you do with the magazines? But is that not a fair
but
question?
No, we have to start from someplace where we all agree.
No,
but
we
don't. You want to die? We absolutely
tell me
do.
what you think, and then maybe you can convince me.
The way you start, we'll never have a conversation. So I want to start from having a conversation.
You need to lie to me first, and then, you're not going to answer a straightforward adult question.
Are you?
I'm not lying at all.
No, I'm asking, are you going to answer a straightforward question?
I'll answer any question.
Are guns a part of gun violence in this country?
Well, of course, they're the tool that is used very often to commit violence.
So we have to start from that point. Finally,
that's fine.
Thank you for agreeing. Thank you for agreeing.
If I have a high-capacity magazine in my possession, your definition of high capacity, and I don't want to give it up, will you take it from me?
So let's take that one off the table.
Why?
What about the other two?
Wait, why?
Because you like to stick on the one that will prevent the conversation.
I like to ask very simple, factual questions.
I mentioned
and
three
see if
things.
you're straightforward enough to answer them.
I mentioned three things. And so the way this happens in government, people present things,
but why won't
and we
you
figure
answer
out
that?
Because you want to get to a point where people will reject any conversation about dealing with guns.
But I think all of our viewers know where you stand.
No, they don't.
The answer is, of course, I'm going to take it from you and punish you if you don't give it to me.
The fact of the matter is we have less than 5% of the population, and we own all the half of civilian guns and 30% of mass shootings. But thank you for agreeing that guns are a part of gun violence problems in America. Next time we have a conversation,
I
we can get to the
always
fix.
say what I think. In contrast to you, I will say,
I always say what I think as well.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It. Colion Noir is an NRA TV host, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Noir, thanks a lot very much for coming on. So I'm starting to get the sense that confiscation, clearly the goal, because there's no other goal that makes sense. You can't, if there are tens of millions of so-called assault rifles in circulation and many tens of millions of these so-called high-capacity magazines, you're never going to solve the problem that the left believes is responsible for gun violence unless you take those away, right?
It's the only logical conclusion. Because if you think about it, if you start with gun control based around the idea of restricting or taking something away, if we got rid of, let's say we got rid of the AR-15s, they account for less than 3% of gun deaths in this country. Right. So let's say we get an assault weapons ban, right? At that point, all right, let's say another shooting happens like the one we just had recently in California where he used a handgun. Then they'll be telling us, you know what, that didn't work, so now we need to do something more strict, which is ban firearms. So inevitably, it's always a race to total and complete confiscation, but they never want to admit that. They want to act like they're being reasonable and say, no. We just want to get rid of the big scary guns. But it's like, the big scary guns aren't the problem. They account for less than 3% of gun deaths. But 80% of gun deaths in this country are committed by way of handguns. So if you honestly believe that the tool is the issue, why aren't you addressing the handguns?
Well, that's a very smart point, and one that I plan to bring up next time we speak to someone on the other side. But my question's even broader than that. Why, in a chaotic and increasingly chaotic world, the one that we live in, would you want to disarm normal law-abiding people? What threat do they pose?
I think there are two different dynamics going on here. I think there's one dynamic which is composed of people who are just generally ignorant about firearms. And then I think there's another dynamic of people who are generally have an agenda to gain more control and to push the idea of reliance on government. And it sounds conspiratorial, but it's not. Because if I'm self-reliant in my ability to protect myself, my natural inclination is not to depend on the government to be there when something goes wrong. Right. And you can't push the necessity of government if you have a populace of people who understand and embrace the idea of self-reliance, especially when it comes to protecting your life and your family. And so the people on the side of the... Go ahead.
No, I was just complimenting the point. It's deep. So what you're saying is that many people on the periphery of the conversation just haven't really thought about it, but the people who driving the conversation who have thought about it do have an agenda.
Absolutely. Huh. It's one of those things where... Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's it. I'm just impressed. I hope you'll come back and join us again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.